The Loyalty Leaders podcast is brought to you by Loyalty Summit CXM, coming up in Stockholm on March 18th and 19th, 2025. Loyalty Summit CXM is the world's most senior retail loyalty event. It's where engagement begins. Join us in Stockholm for senior-level discussions and networking. For more information, visit loyaltysummitcxm.com. Welcome to episode 41 of the Loyalty Leaders podcast. In episode 41, founder and CEO of the Wise Marketer Group, Bill Hanifin, chats with Jodi Daniels, founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, and Whitnee Hawthorne, Global Head of Travel and Hospitality at Snowflake at the recent Loyalty Summit CXM in Los Angeles. First up, Bill and Jodi discuss the importance and relevance of trust and privacy in loyalty programs.
Hi, this is Bill Hanifin, the Managing Editor of the Wise Marketer and CEO of the Wise Marketer Group, and I'm here with Jodi Daniels, who's founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisory.
Well, hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good morning.
Hello, hello.
Here we are today in this sunny day. Oh, it's raining a little bit,
Yeah, it's
isn't
not
it?
sunny.
Yeah, it's raining in Los Angeles, but they desperately need the water, so that's a good thing.
I left sun and warm in Atlanta.
Oh, in Atlanta.
To come to rainy and cloudy in LA.
There you go. As I came from Fort Lauderdale, so we both just made this sacrifice for the loyalty business, didn't we?
That's how much we love it.
That's right. I know.
We're very loyal.
Exactly right. And we're here at Loyalty Summit CXM 2025, which is February in Los Angeles. And we just sat through a morning's worth of sessions, really interesting. But before we get into some of that, I'd like to know a little bit about you. It's the first time we met, first time we've had a chance to meet. And interesting, we think we've met everybody in this industry. Probably you have, I have, but here we are new. But tell me a little bit about Red Clover Advisors.
Sure.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So we are a data privacy consulting company, and we are helping companies honestly build trust with customers, which is really akin to what everyone at this conference is trying to do, right? Build loyalty. We're doing it through the lens of privacy and often privacy laws. There's a long list of laws that companies now have to follow and a variety of different requirements. So we're simplifying data privacy to help them do that.
Okay, so what's your client base look like?
It is across the board. It is a small company all the way to a global Fortune 500 because it's really about the data that companies have, and it's not always so much around the size of the company, but really around the kind of personal information that they could have. Seriously, they could just have an email, and that email counts as personal information in all of these laws. They could be doing some type of tracking on a website. Just that counts as personal information under these laws.
Interesting. So, and the U.S. is a little bit behind, but we're quickly coming up to speed. I know there's a lot of legislation pending.
Well, we have, as of this recording, 19 states that have a comprehensive privacy law that is passed and signed. And we have over 13 that are effective today, with more coming into effect this year in 2025, more in 2026. And while we're sitting here in a legislative season, many more that are getting initiated and reviewed.
Interesting. So, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but I feel like we're the industry that could really take the leadership in a lot of these conversations, because if we're the ones who actually know this business and we know what the risks and rewards are in building brand and building trust with customers. If we don't do something, then the legislators rightfully will just go their own way, and they'll pass whatever laws they think are right without input from our industry. So.
Exactly. Well, self-regulation came around, back in 2009, 2010, when the little ad choices icon came along, trying to really work with online advertising. And that was to try and prevent government legislation. I always joke it kind of lasted about 10 years in the U.S., and it is quickly growing for a variety of different reasons. And I loved what you said, though, about the opportunity that this industry has, because this is really all about building a connection with individuals, and that's what privacy is. Privacy is about making that individual feel comfortable to provide the data that ultimately might best serve them. And we want to be able to protect that as well.
Interesting. So let me ask you, just so we know exactly, are you providing compliance type support for companies? So let's say I'm a retailer and I'm not even running a loyalty program, but I certainly have marketing campaigns and probably a lot of opt-in campaigns. I'm collecting a lot of data. How are you helping them? You're helping them have a policy and procedure in place? Do some compliance? Do they get certified? Do you provide products or technology? Just cover some of
Great
that.
question. So we're going to be a professional services organization.
Okay.
It could start with a strategy. We're going to have a company, they have a great new plan. They want to launch a loyalty program, adjust something new and different. We're going to be able to help provide the privacy lens to that conversation.
Okay.
Can they collect that data? Should they use this data? And so from there, we'll be able to compare it to the privacy laws, and so those compliance elements as well. To comply with any of the laws, long list of requirements, definitely compliance services. So imagine kind of the strategic to compliance services.
Okay. So my touch point here was I had worked for Visa some years ago, and we'd worked with a lot of the banks, and at the time the PCI audits that was a new thing.
Right.
I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that. But is that still the standard? Is that a standard that any kind of organization that holds PII would have to adhere to?
PCI is still here,
Okay.
but really that is actually outside the scope of what we tend to work on. PCI is very specific to the use of credit card information. If we think about financial services, many people are familiar with, for example, the privacy notice that you may get in the mail, and it has a chart. It's really specific. That is from the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. That's a financial services privacy law. We are modernizing privacy laws nowadays. So imagine you're going to ask me for my name and my email. You're going to track the different stays that I've had, maybe if I'm going somewhere, or all of my different transactions. How you're going to analyze all of that data and whatever data you're collecting, the collection and use and sharing of that data. That is the data that is in scope for all these privacy laws. For example, GDPR is the big European privacy law. CCPA was the first U.S. privacy law. That's the California Consumer Privacy Act, and a long list of others that are coming. So those are going to be the more modern privacy laws that at Red Clover we're really going to be helping companies with.
Interesting. And my familiarity is that some of these laws, CCPA and others, are becoming increasingly restrictive. I mean, there's some very specific language in CCPA about loyalty programs, I think, that it could make it at some point almost difficult for a company to launch a loyalty program.
I would say there are specifics in these laws. I would offer that, especially in the U.S., you can still launch them. It's really about being thoughtful to what's actually being collected, and does it need to be collected. So the theme in most of these privacy laws, let's stick with the U.S. with a few exceptions. There's always an exception to the rule.
Right.
Is it's very much around minimizing data collected, and then notice, really being specific in what's happening. And CCPA does require some really specific items that have to be in that privacy notice, which is why that conversation with whomever is responsible for privacy and whatever program's actually happening happens. And then choice. I can unwind my choices. So if I decide I don't want to be a part of that loyalty program and I want to ask for my data to be deleted, a Californian has that right, and someone in many other states do as well.
Okay. How, as a consumer, so I have to ask you a couple of, this is something I love about our business, is that we speak through this professional lens, but we're all consumers, and we participate in these programs. So I sometimes wonder when I ask to be unsubscribed from even a newsletter, or I want my data deleted, if that becomes to that, I have that option. How do I know that it actually happens?
Well, that's
as a consumer?
Really great question, and that is all about trust, because the reality is, as a consumer, you are trusting that the company you asked to do something actually did it.
Right.
Right. As a customer, I can't go in your systems and get proof and go in to do that. I'm trusting, just like I am trusting that that company was going to deliver me an amazing product and service. I'm trusting that it's also going to actually be deleted, or I'm not going to get those emails anymore.
So the trust is warranted until I get the next email, or I find out that I'm still on some sort of a list and I get a solicitation, and then I say, wait a minute, what happened?
Exactly.
And then
That's
how does a
exactly it.
consumer complain? What's the process like these days, and what's the proclivity of the average consumer to follow through on that complaint?
Well, consumers now have a number of options. Obviously, social media is one, and here it happens. The other, though, is the regulators in the states that have privacy laws. So in California, there's actually an agency. So for people listening, most people are familiar with kind of the insurance commissioner. Sort of imagine one of those, but now for data privacy. That exists in Europe already. They have data protection offices. that is what exists in California. Many of the other states have the attorney general that you would go and complain to, and then some states are forming them. So for example, in Texas has a website that consumers can go to and submit a complaint. And within the first 75 days of the Texas privacy law going into effect in 2024, they received over 500 complaints. Consumers are finding their way when they're really unhappy to do so. And then, of course, we have the Federal Trade Commission. There's a number of federal agencies, but at the state level, consumers are figuring it out.
Interesting. And what are the financial penalties like these days? Are they on the rise? Is it because typically business will respond to some kind of a punitive action? So if there is a financial penalty of enough substance, they might manage themselves differently.
Well, like all good things in compliance, it depends.
Okay.
But what's I think important is to understand it's per record, which means if you were to have, one individual, that might be $1,500, $7,500, kind of depends on the situation in the state. If it was, though, a significant group of them, right, 1,500 times the number of people in a program can add up quickly. And while financial penalties are definitely there, some of these things are visible from the outside, which means anyone can read your privacy notice and see if it's appropriately written or not. Anyone can test the privacy rights process and figure out, is it working properly or not? So people can see that from the outside. And for me, I think what's so important is the whole conversation around loyalty is again around trust. So people who are unhappy are now no longer going to be a loyal customer. And while financial penalties might be high, what's the value of that customer to your brand? And if you use data in a way that makes them unhappy, you may now have just lost that customer. They might tell their friends, and it can have a ripple effect.
Right. That's where the value really is, because I saw something very interesting the other day that there's a number of lawsuits, I guess, Apple and others were involved in them for violating some aspect of consumer privacy. And they said, I think this had to do with data breaches. So this was the end result of the data breach resolution process. And class action lawsuits become a thing. It becomes probably like a greenfield for the legal community to go and have that kind of litigation ongoing. They said the average amount of payout for the consumer in these kind of lawsuits, the bigger ones, was $20.
Oh, exactly. I'm sure we've all received the little email that says you earn $2 or $20 or what PayPal account would you like your $5 to go to?
Yeah.
So it's definitely really small. The PR reputation, that loss of customer,
Right.
For me, that's the piece why companies want to really get this right. And the other way companies are getting this wrong is they're saying one thing in the privacy notice and they're doing something else. So to your question of, how do we help companies? Well, we're trying to get marketers to understand you have to think about the privacy aspects early.
Okay.
To make sure that you're able to do all the great things that you want to, and then it ties to the requirements, which is make sure you have what you need in a privacy notice. Make sure you honor someone's choices. Maybe give them more choices if you need to. Some of the very basic pieces can be solved with just the upfront planning.
Okay. And I'm curious about how, I've got so many questions. I'm trying to keep them all in my head for you, but to what extent are there best practices that are being adopted in the industry, even about something that's, I guess this is in the domain, the unsubscribe from an email newsletter list or an email. I happen to have noticed, and I started to document the different types of responses. You'll see an unsubscribe in some emails in Google, if you use Gmail, it's right next to the sender email address. It's very clear. It's blue, and you can click on it. And sometimes you get an instant message that says you're unsubscribed. I've used that, or else I've used one down in the footer of an email that'll take me to a form that's very unclear about, well, you can participate in all these. It's almost like I'm starting from scratch. You can participate in all these different newsletters that we send out, and then somehow at the bottom it says unsubscribe. But my point is that I have seen probably 4 or 5 different responses to my request to unsubscribe. Some of them make it very easy to do. Some are complicated, and I feel like they're actually not trying to be helpful. So in your professional services work, are you advocating for a solution that's like a best practice standard?
Right. Well, so let me address that Google one, because Google and Yahoo actually made a requirement that they wanted that one-click unsubscribe next to the sender name to help reduce spam.
Okay.
So that is also a requirement to anyone. Most email service providers are able to help you do that. There are some settings and finagling you need to do. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go do a little bit of research, go to Google.
Right. And we're going to call you.
Or you can call us as well.
Clover Advisors, yes.
Yes. So the other piece, though, that you were talking about in terms of best practices, I really like to call it the unsubscribe and save the unsubscribe, rather. If someone goes to unsubscribe, they're mad. They don't like either the volume of content, they don't think it's relevant to you, or they're really mad at your company. If I'm really mad at your company, you need to make it easy to find that unsubscribe from all button. It should be there. I should be able to easily do that. At the same time, a lot of companies haven't given people choices. And you might be a brand that is sending, let's say you're a clothing brand, and you might have women's clothes, men's clothes, kids' clothes, and you're giving me everything. I don't want all of that. I really actually want to be able to just get what I want. And you could extrapolate that across any industry. The opportunity to be able to make those selections means that you are able to save the unsubscribe, because I'm going to now opt into what I actually want to hear from you. And I do like those choices. So where we're seeing companies move is have these universal consent preference centers to be able to have someone opt in or out of what's relevant for them. It should always, though, be very easy and clear to unsubscribe from all. That should not be hidden. And you also, best practice, do not want all the other items checked as if I was opted in.
Pre-checked.
So no pre-checks. Thank you. That was the word I was thinking of. We do not want any pre-checks anywhere. That is a no-no. That is not considered consent. Anyone listening, if you have a pre-check box and you might have to comply with the concept of consent, it is not considered freely given with a pre-check. So if you listen to anything I have to say, no pre-check boxes. But from there, then you have a lot of flexibility to be able to keep that person.
So what do you think about this one? Similar, I've had my email address pre-populated, and I've had to enter my email address. And honestly, like I happen to have 3 different email boxes that I check, and so I usually know which one I'm in, but it does make me pause now and again when I see it blank and it says input your email, and I'm thinking, gosh, am I in this one or that one? Because I want to make sure I do the right thing.
I'm in the camp of, if I am clicking from an email, I should have it pre-populated. Okay.
Which, and that was my thought all the way through, is if I'm unsubscribing for any number of reasons, it's usually, it has an element of negativity. You're either inundating me or I'm not happy with your brand. So anything that you do in the process that makes me feel like you're making it hard for me, or you're entering some element of doubt or something, that would just sort of endorse my feelings of negativity, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And privacy is all about trying to make things clearer and easier. Be transparent when I'm opting in. Here's what you're collecting, and here's how you're going to use it, and here's why. Then people understand. No one likes to be surprised in the world of data and privacy. They want cool little surprise and delights, but not where they do what I call the scratch your head test. No one wants to understand, well, how did that happen? Clear and transparent will honestly win happy, loyal people.
So I just one more, and then I'll get off the email subject. But there's a person I follow he's really well known. His name's Christopher Penn. I don't know if you've seen him, but he writes now a lot about AI. But he's been there from the very beginning. Some social media. He's been through the whole evolution. But his newsletters, I think, do very well. He's got some great content. But he has the most obvious, almost comical opportunity for you to opt out. You know, he has a picture of a dog, and he has happy dog, unhappy dog, but he really puts it in your face. And I think sometimes as somebody who sends a lot of email from Wise Marketer, we think, we don't want to invite too many people to unsubscribe. It might hurt our list. But on the other hand, I think he's so forthright with it, and it's almost like there's no way you're going to laugh, and you're going, of course, I love your newsletter. I mean, I'm sure for some, he gets the unsubscribes, but you see what I'm saying is, like, maybe he's expressing like, I'm not afraid, I'm giving you good content. If you really don't want it, go ahead and unsubscribe.
Right.
But have you seen more people being that way?
I've seen a
Or do they have
few.
courage for that?
I've seen a few. I think your word of courage is a really good one.
Okay.
Because people, it takes so much effort to get the person on that list. But the reality is, if I'm on your list and I don't open and I don't engage, I'm really not a very good person. You really don't want me on your list.
Yeah.
I'm hurting everything. I might
Yeah.
even be costing you money.
Yeah, yeah,
So to get off the list, it's an okay thing.
yeah. So let's talk about channels really quickly. How about in the SMS channel? Because
So
email's
SMS channel
one.
is opt-in. Opt-in for marketing messages. There are oodles of class action lawsuits. The big privacy law there is the TCPA here in the U.S.
Right.
Globally, there's a myriad of other laws, but it is an opt-in channel.
And TCPA penalties are enormously.
They are, and again, because it's a by record thing. So
Right.
it's typically if you were the person harmed there, you're not by yourself. You weren't the only sole little phone number over there. It's a collection of them, and that is where it gets incredibly expensive.
Let me ask you this. What kind of C-level support do you think is there for privacy regulation? And how do marketers, marketers sometimes are so focused on let's run the campaign and get results. Other areas of the company might be more compliance concerned, but do you talk to a lot of C-level people to get their support for these
I do.
initiatives?
And it is, for companies that really appreciate consumers and trust and wanting to do the right thing by their customers, those individuals tend to understand that privacy law is just another law. And it is here because unfortunately companies abused the privilege of connecting with individuals and how they were using their data.
Right.
So those that understand it and just build it in early. And it isn't always the office of no. It can be the office of, well, here's how we have to do it. But the reality is, if you go around the requirements, you're going to make individuals unhappy. You might have fines.
Right.
And that defeats the entire point of what we're trying to do, which is build relationships with consumers. And the more data that you get that is accurate from them, then people are going to feel comfortable. The last part I'll just suggest is everyone listening, I am sure, has answered the I don't want to answer that button, right? The I don't
Yes.
prefer to answer.
Yes.
The reason is because companies don't trust how that data is going to be used. You don't want to be that company. You want to be that company where the person feels so comfortable and feels like it's going to be valuable. That's the essence of a loyalty program, and that is the essence of privacy right there. That's where they intersect.
That's great. If you were to leave marketers, especially in this group, all loyalty marketers with one idea to take away about their privacy policy and their plans, what would you say?
I would say that privacy matters and that privacy is really all about trust. It is about getting someone to trust how your company collects, uses, and stores data. Put privacy at the beginning, just like you're going to with, do I have the right content? Do I have the right imagery? Do I have the right tools in place? Privacy needs to be part of that conversation up front, and it will yield amazing returns for you.
That's great. Good way to land it. So Jodi Daniels, Red Clover Advisors, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
I really appreciate it.
All right. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Next up, Bill chats with Whitnee Hawthorne about how data can come together to help create a seamless view of the customer for loyalty programs.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Hanifin, the managing editor of The Wise Marketer, and I'm here with Whitnee Hawthorne, who's with Snowflake. It's really neat to talk to you, and Snowflake is one of those intriguing companies that sometimes I think in the loyalty business we can become a little bit self-centered or navel-gazing, let's say. So we tend to focus on all the loyalty providers, those companies that provide loyalty technology, management systems and things. But data is the core of our business, and Snowflake now is prominent. I'm hearing Snowflake come up in so many different conversations. But before we get into all of that, just tell me a little bit about yourself, like your history in loyalty and just what your current responsibilities are at Snowflake.
Sure. So hi, I'm Whitnee Hawthorne. I am the Global Head of Travel and Hospitality at Snowflake. And my role is really to help translate how data and AI can help travel and hospitality companies deliver on their business goals, whether that's improving the customer experience, driving a more efficient operation, or increasing revenue and profitability.
Okay, so those are big, broad brushes. And when I think about, isn't that what we're trying to do in our loyalty management system? So what does Snowflake bring to equation that's different than, say, an LMS, or maybe it's a CDP or whatever kind of data lake that somebody's operating?
Yeah, that's great. So what Snowflake really helps to do is to enable all of those things: CDPs, hyper-personalized marketing,
Okay.
loyalty, collaboration, partnership. We really help to enable that and allow you to get more insights out of your data, have more action with your data, and ultimately deliver on all of those really cool AI and generative AI functionalities or products that folks are looking to leverage. So if I take that just kind of like a step deeper, one of the things that I get really excited about is not just the data warehouse that Snowflake is, but the actual ecosystem that we're a part of.
Okay.
Last year in September, we launched the Travel and Hospitality AI Data Cloud, which sounds like kind of woo-woo, esoteric,
Yeah.
like what in the world are we even talking about?
Right.
And so what that is, it's really, for me, there's three parts to it. On one side, you have customers, primary and let's call it secondary customers, right? And those primary customers are travel and hospitality customers. And at Snowflake, travel and hospitality is broad, which is not unlike most software companies. Like an Amazon's going to operate the same way, but or AWS is going to operate the same way. But travel and hospitality for us, it's airlines, hotels, rental cars, cruise companies, quick service restaurants, travel tech, OTAs, TMCs, spas, casinos, gyms. It kind of goes on and on,
Okay,
right?
big category.
But very, very broad category. But you can think about all of those as travel and hospitality companies. And so you have those types of customers on one side. And then on the other side, you have the first, second, and third party data that sits on the Snowflake platform. And in the middle, and this is the most interesting part for me, is everything that makes that data useful. The language models, the applications, the partners, the AI functionality, right, that is inherent to the platform.
Right.
All the things that make that data useful. When you put those together, that really is what the AI Data Cloud represents.
Okay, so this will be a newbie question maybe for you, but is a CDP part of the Snowflake ecosystem? Is that one element of it?
Yeah, so that would sit in the middle when we start
Okay.
thinking about making the data useful.
Yes.
So Snowflake itself doesn't offer a CDP.
Okay.
But we have a lot of partners that do sit within that space, that in the middle, right, in that middle layer, that take the data on Snowflake and then turn that into or allow that, right, maybe you guys edit that part, okay. We do have a lot of partners who sit in the middle who develop CDPs leveraging the Snowflake platform.
Okay.
And leveraging that platform, you can ensure that your data is secure, that it's governed, that it's unified, and also that you can enrich it with third-party data where it makes sense.
Okay, so hygiene included in that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so, and I have just a curiosity question, because I've worked with so many clients that when we talk about, well, let's do a data download, let's look at the customer base, try to get some insights. They always, as a rule, tell us that their data is high quality and in pretty good shape. I mean, once in a while we have somebody say, oh, it's a mess, good luck, you need to do some work with it. But what's the state of data these days when you get these, you engage with a large, let's go into the large retail, large category of those that you're working with. Is it pretty buttoned up these days, or is there still a lot of gaps to close?
I'd say there's still a lot of opportunity in closing the gaps. When I start thinking about our customers and the data maturity curve, right, you kind of start with migration,
Okay.
right? And for migration to happen, you first do need to understand where your data is, what it is. You need to clean it up,
Yeah,
right? And you
yeah.
provide that hygiene, categorize it, make sure the nomenclature is appropriate. But you have to do that cleanup, and then you migrate, right? And so if we think
Right.
about the maturity curve, the first place is migrating. After migrating, you can move into the space of predictive analytics,
Okay.
right? So that's then being able to drive better insights than you were before. From predictive analytics, we see companies start to move into AI and ML applications, as well as monetization, right? So starting to monetize that data.
Right.
And from there, we start to think about the idea of true generative AI capability, moving finally into what I would call a complete ecosystem, where everything is operating together.
Right, right.
And it's a long curve. We've got customers in different places along that data curve. As you move into that predictive, and when you think about, because it's layered, so when you think about moving through that maturity curve, you don't do it with all your data all at once, right?
Okay, yeah.
So usually you're identifying a use case and saying, here's the use case that I want to work on. Here are the data sets aligned, and you
Yeah.
start there. And so what does that mean? It means for a lot of companies, portions of their data today are in a really healthy state, and other portions are still waiting to go through those early migration steps.
Okay, interesting. So I don't know if you were in the session earlier today, but there was a comment made, I think Phil Rubin, who's the conference chair, asked the group, he said, how many of you are using 50% or more of your data, available data? And I don't think one hand went up. Did that surprise you?
Not at all. Not at all. This is, the fact of the matter is, like, data everywhere and no insights to be found.
Okay.
Like, not for the amount of data that exists. And it's
Yeah.
because the data's not always usable, right?
Right.
Can you trust it, right? You need a single source of truth oftentimes to trust the data. It can be hard to access the data. There can be a lot of latency along with the mistrust. So not only do you're not sure really if the data I'm getting is the
Right.
right data, it's also old,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so it makes it hard to actually truly leverage it. And that is not even including the idea of the data silos, where within an organization you have your data sitting in multiple places. Like if I think about airlines, for example, I'm one person, but I'm in at least 3 platforms, right? I'm in a passenger platform that really has to do with the day of operations and me flying. I'm in a loyalty platform, right, with my loyalty number and membership, and I'm separately in a marketing platform as a customer, let's call it, instead of just a
Okay.
loyalty member.
Right.
And trying to even pull together all of those pieces to make an informed decision, it's not happening in enough places yet.
Interesting. So you mentioned data silos. That's your topic for tomorrow, isn't it? You're on a panel talking about data silos. What are you going to dig into there?
I think we'll dig into whatever really the audience wants to hear, since it's a panel.
Okay.
I think one of the things that's really important to me is the idea of starting, like I mentioned, or you mentioned that I mentioned,
Yeah.
starting to solve previously unsolvable problems.
Oh, yeah, that's a great term.
Yeah, and taking this step back and saying, well, why do we do the things that we do? Why do we do them the way that we do? And a lot of times that comes back to what data was accessible at the time. And sometimes there's no data accessible at the time, right? And so it was someone's gut decision. Sometimes, oftentimes the data was limited. My favorite example to just take a step back and think about this, because I think it resonates with most people who have ever traveled, is the idea that airlines close the plane door 15 or 20 minutes before departure. So I don't know if you've ever been in that experience where you have a connecting flight and you misconnect, right? So your flight gets in late.
Yes.
And you hustle to the next gate.
Yeah.
You get there and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, we closed the door, let's look at reaccommodating you, getting you on the next flight.
Right.
And you're sitting there and the plane is out there.
It's happened.
And you're saying, hey, but I see the plane there. So no, we can't open that door once we close it. But come on over here and let me reaccommodate you at the stand, right? The ticket agent maybe helps you do it.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there, and this process takes 10 minutes to get you reaccommodated on the next flight 2 hours later, and the plane is still there.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, what the heck? Why did they
Maddening.
close the door? It's
Yeah,
the most
sure.
frustrating experience.
Sure.
At the same time, that seemingly arduous, not arduous isn't the right word, that seemingly, what is the right word? This decision that you make just because, right? It's like a decision
Sort
to
of
make.
arbitrary
Sort
or
of arbitrary.
something? Yeah,
That's not arduous. Arbitrary.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that arbitrary decision to close the door 20 or 50 minutes before has a lot to do with the fact that airlines can't process all the data required to know whether or not to keep the door open.
Oh, interesting.
And that
Okay.
is because oftentimes of data silos, right? Data that sits in different places,
Okay,
as
yeah.
well as latency and being able to bring all that data together, right? Now, in today's world, what we're starting to see and what we know can happen is that data can come together, and I'll talk about some of that data in a second, but that data can come together, and then you can apply generative AI to do the analysis quickly that a mind just can't do very quickly, to say, keep that door open for this person who's connecting.
You know what, as consumers, we're also critical of brands, right? And especially in air travel, everybody you have that experience, you say, I'll never fly that airline again, and, of course you're back.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, it's much more complex than you would think. So here's a scenario for you, in that if the airline had access to the data, they knew that you were actually deplaning, and they knew what gate you were at, and they know how long the walk or maybe half running time is, they could factor all these things together and say, you know what, we're actually going to hold and not close the door for that person right? Because it's very reasonable that they're going to be there. But if they can't do all those machinations, they're not going to do it. They're just going to go by the operating manual and say it's 15 minutes before, boom.
Yep. Which is a data limitation, right? Exactly, that's what they're going to do. But the limitations get removed, and we can start thinking about not just those things that you mentioned, but even more, right? So imagine that I can understand who is on this passenger manifest, who's going to travel, and I know that Bill is coming in on a late plane.
Yeah.
And coming in on this late plane, I also know the time from, the average time, walking time from this gate to that gate. So let's just say gate A to gate B. I know whether or not Bill is traveling alone or with small children, which might slow down that walking time.
That's right.
I know whether or not Bill has mobility issues and may need a wheelchair, which would also slow down that walking time, right? So I know whether or not Bill has checked a bag. I need to consider that, or if he has not checked a bag, right? I know all of these things. And those are all different data sets that kind of need to come together. In addition, I can also want to bring into understand Bill as a loyalty member.
Oh, that's another factor.
Right. So how valuable do I see you to the company?
Right.
And what is your loyalty status? And I can start to bring that in to the into the equation.
Right.
I can then also start to feed in the data around the plane itself. Right. So is there backup on the tarmac? Right. Is this plane a plane that's likely going to go out and sit for 20 minutes anyway?
So many factors.
Yeah. Is the luggage loaded? Is this a plane that might need to be de-iced?
Right.
Is the crew actually showing up on time or not? Right. I can start to take all these different data pieces, bring them together, and then make the right decision to say, you know what? I don't need to close the plane until Bill gets on. Or I don't need to close the plane until 3 minutes past departure time because I know I'm not going to be able to take off anyway. And then you can even get to the point of being able to process this is where generative AI really starts to come in, to process it and say, what is the ultimate revenue impact of me holding the plane to 3 minutes past?
Yeah.
And then make that decision based on like actual dollars and not just customer experience.
You can actually calculate ROI on all of that, right? It's customer sat might be one, but there's an actual ROI.
Is another thing. Yeah. And so those were previously unsolvable problems that now we are seeing the capability to solve.
That's incredible. So somebody was just talking, the whole conference, the theme here is about getting loyalty unstuck and transcending the points programs and sort of the promotional aspect of things. Somebody just told me, they said people are loyal to brands, not programs. And then somebody said, actually, they might be, at least in sort of where the brands are on par, you have choice as a consumer, they're probably loyal to the experience as a deciding factor. It's almost a race, like whoever could assemble the data this way and be able to triage it and make those good decisions. That goes beyond just reporting to the FAA, my on-time departure rates or something like that. This is being able to manage in such an optimized way that the traveler is delighted. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Or at least not inconvenienced any more than they have to be.
Exactly, not inconvenienced any more than they have to be, and directly weighing it against profitability, which ultimately, is the goal for businesses to be profitable.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that we are in a space where the question isn't if this will happen, it's when and who will be first.
Yeah.
And whoever's first is really going to drive the path for others to follow, which means others may not be leaders in the space, and some will become obsolete, right? Because they're not able to actually deliver at that standard.
Well, not to distract from the main part of the conversation, but it's another scenario that I found interesting yesterday. I flew out from Fort Lauderdale to LA yesterday before the conference, was on an airline that you have on your resume, and I love it because they messaged me in flight, and I was getting messages. But I was not early, and as I'm walking down the concourse, I saw that people were queued up and boarding the flight, but it was also 20 minutes before flight time. I looked at my app, and in big red letters it said, "Doors closed." And I thought, that's interesting. So I wonder if they built a buffer into the app to get me to hustle and hurry, but it also could have sent me into a panic. And then actually what happened is I didn't get my bottle of water or little snack that I wanted, and once I got in line, I realized, I had time, but maybe that's just too much of a personal story, but it's another way that maybe data could be optimized.
I think that's where it starts to say, that doors closed may or may not have been a buffer to try and get you to the airline, but it could also be a thing where you can start to think about sending that message, right? Because that's a little bit of manipulation, right? We're manipulating to get you, which is, if it's in your best interest or whatever, there's different reasons to do it. The company can make the decision whether we want to manipulate or not.
Yeah.
But it'd be really cool to be able to do it based on who you are as a traveler, right? So maybe you send that doors closed to someone who doesn't travel often, who's an infrequent traveler, because they need to hurry. itinerary
Yeah.
versus sending it to someone who's traveling, who's a business traveler traveling every week and gets the system and knows what time to show up. And you could send them a note saying, doors literally closing, like closing
Yeah.
in 30 seconds. And there's going to be a different response.
I am stunned and immensely curious about what the future might hold. And just, you've touched on it now, just talking about some of these scenarios, but what else would you say, what's the future hold actually in the way that we can manage data to create better customer experiences?
So I think a lot of things are coming that are going to make not only a better customer experience, but also provide a direct bottom line impact to companies and improve employee experience. And I think when you have that situation that the customer experience gets better, the employee experience gets better, and it's directly designed to drive profit, right? This is really exciting. And so some of the things I think we're going to see coming are an actual true seamless journey, right? Through data collaboration, which is something that Snowflake enables, the ability to share and collaborate data with your partners, right? That third-party kind of exchange. And what that looks like to me as a traveler, no longer having to be the middleman. So, for example, my flight got in super late last night, and by the time I got into my I called an Uber ride service, right? By the time I got into my ride share, I realized that I wasn't going to get to the hotel until after 1 o'clock.
Oh boy.
And so I was a little bit nervous of like, are they holding my reservation? Are they not holding my reservation? Let me go ahead and call and make sure.
Okay.
Right? In that instance, I'm the middleman. My flight gets in a little late. Because of that, I have to call the hotel to make sure that I am that they know that I'm arriving, because my hotel and my airline aren't talking to each other, even if maybe there is some type of points exchange going there, right? They're a points partner of the airline.
True.
So I think in the future, and really heading into this year, we're going to see a lot more data collaboration that's going to enable things like, I land, my flight is late, I get a message from the hotel saying, hey, we see that your flight was late. We're holding your room. Don't worry. See you when you get here, right? That exchange. That'll happen also for ground transport. So if I had a car pre-reserved, right, having the company understand that my flight is late, letting me know, hey, your car is still here. We've adjusted your car based on the time of your flight coming in.
Right.
That type of true seamless journey, I think, it's coming this year.
You know what, I think it's really important in this category too, because I've honestly thought at times that if you're a retailer, we had somebody talking about Williams Sonoma and some other big retailers, but I thought, oh, there was a lady from Target who talked today, and I thought, what a great playground that is. If you're going to reshape the customer experience to the benefit of customer loyalty, you have so many options, right? But air travel experience is a little bit different. You know, it's a tough environment these days. There's only so much you can do. It's almost like you have to serve at sort of the lowest common denominator, just in safeties in mind. But you're kind of expanding my mind here, thinking that if I simplified it, I'd say, who would have thought that data optimization and management would be maybe the door opener for improving the travel experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even gets to, if we're staying in the airline space with crew scheduling, have you ever been on a flight and they're like, oh, the last crew timed out, we're trying to find you a new crew, hold on, right? By leveraging data and generative AI, you can start to enhance your crew scheduling, taking into consideration everything, right? That schedule that day, what is happening, across your network, what is happening across the airport, and data exchange with the airport and the ATC. You can also then start to pull in the contracts, right? Because contracts matter when you're trying to do your staffing.
Right.
You pull all of that in and can start to actually get more efficient and effective with how you're handling staffing, and have that happen a lot less often.
Okay.
At the same time, airlines don't have to then have crew waiting, right? Just sitting around waiting, which is very expensive for kind of like that type of problem to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, and it expands out into, we just talked a lot about airlines, but it expands out into hotels, it expands out into cruise lines. One of the things that came up earlier that I think is really interesting is this idea of, we want to use the data to know you and do things with you, but we don't want it to be creepy.
Yeah, of course.
And I've been thinking about that for a long time, back when I was in loyalty, right? Because loyalty can get creepy if you're too personalized.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to start moving from this space of being creepy to being comfortable, right? And so this has a lot to do with brand trust, right, and trusting the brand.
Yeah.
But it also has to do with that zero-party data, with a customer saying, I want you to know these things about me.
There you
so
go.
for example, imagine that I want the hotel to know that I like to sleep cold. I want my room set at 60 when I show up in the middle of the night so I can kind of just go straight to bed,
Yep.
right? Being able to walk into the room and the room is cold, right? By bringing your data systems together, you can even, right, to the point of controlling the AC in the room soon,
Right.
allow that to happen seamlessly.
That's fantastic. That's something. So before we wrap this up, you're in a room full of loyalty marketers. This is, I guess, your area of emphasis. You've got a history working for a number of brands on loyalty programs, but if they needed to know one or two things about Snowflake that would change the way they look at this business, what would that be?
I would say if you are wondering, what is the next, right? What is the next thing in loyalty? How do we move past just thinking about making our points efficient and providing real experiences for our customers?
Yeah.
That all starts with data and understanding your customer, and not just understanding how your customer interacts with you, but being able to leverage that third-party data to understand how they interact with the world, right? And that's something that Snowflake can help to enable
Okay.
in a
Awesome.
safe and secure way.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Whitnee Hawthorne with Snowflake. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
You bet. All right, bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the Loyalty Leaders Podcast. Join us for the next episode every Tuesday.